Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Ramblings of a Designer podcast. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about the latest in graphic design news from around the web. My name is Adam. I'm a designer from the San Francisco Bay Area. I specialize in visual UI design with a little bit of illustration. I like to give companies character. And every week I'm joined by my co-host Terry. How's it going, Terry?
Hey, Adam. As Terry says, my name is Terry, and I'm a UX UI designer from the Bay Area, and I help bridge the gap between products and their end users.
All right. And today we have a special guest. Can you fill us in about who it is, Terry?
Oh, should I or should I not? No, I will. Sorry, bad joke. Sorry. Well, we have James here with us, and this is going to be a really great episode. So for everybody who is in that flux of trying to get their resume or trying to get more tips of interviewing or anything else under the sun, we have James. James is actually the manager from Mitchell Martin's product and UX team. He is a recruiter. He's actually been in the staffing industry for 5 years. So he has also worked at a space in Robert Half, and actually he was a national director before running this product team. So James has helped place hundreds of talented people around a lot of cities such as New York, Philadelphia, Dallas, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Columbus, and Tampa. So this is the big kicker. Not only he does recruiting, he also serves in the U.S. Navy Reserves. He's a mechanic with Seabees, and he's been doing that for 6 years. But not only that, you can find him running around, doing camping, photography, and he's kind of like a water to fish. So I will let James tell us a little bit more about himself. So James, welcome so much.
Thank you both for having me. I'm very much looking forward to this.
Awesome. And basically, I just want to tell a little short story how the way James actually got here. One of his colleagues, Renee. Hi, Renee. She actually posted something on LinkedIn. I responded, and then she responded, and then we kept chatting. And then she brought up her colleague, James. Hey, Terry, you should talk to James. Like, oh, okay. And then James and I started talking, and well, here he is. So LinkedIn is a powerful platform. So anyways, let's get into the questions. So James, so regarding of your background of getting into the Navy, so what was the biggest lesson that you learned from being in the military?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely a lot of takeaways. It definitely was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, and it helped shape me in a lot of ways today. I would say some of the biggest takeaways that I really got from it was really learning and listening for attention to detail, and being able to, I guess, follow orders, which you learn pretty quickly in boot camp, and then throughout the rest of my career doing that. Something else that was a unique takeaway that I did not expect to get from when I joined the Navy was actually being able to treat everyone with the same respect, no matter what rank or rate or who they are. What's one of the amazing things about it is in the community that I'm in and I've seen within the military is that everyone treats each other with respect, and it doesn't matter where you come from or who you are. You're all looked at in the same way, which is just unbelievable. And I would say, finally, being a mechanic, it's what was amazing about it is that when I joined, I actually barely even knew how to put gas in my car. I live in New York City. I don't drive a ton, and when I took my ASVAB test for the military, they said I was good with mechanical comprehension, and next thing I knew, I was becoming a diesel mechanic. And the lesson I learned from that was learning a new tool, a new trade, and being able to not be afraid to try new things. So having that experience really just helped shape me into like where I am today.
Wow,
Wow.
that is really really interesting. How you said earlier about learning of a new trade and basically not to get scared because, as you know, there are different types of boot camps and courses and skills, and basically everybody is trying to either shift into UX or maybe UI, or they want to try to do coding and stuff like that. And I really think that is a really good statement of what you just said. That basically, don't get scared, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have like this funny motto that I kind of live by, which is I say do it afraid. Like courage is not doing it unafraid. It's being able to kind of tackle your fears while being scared and trying the new things until they become less scary. And so I've been able to kind of bring that into a lot of different aspects of my life.
Mm,
Oh,
that's
great.
awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah. Also, too, I I think we touched on this a little bit as well, but also too, what were the lessons that you learned um, from the military, and basically how did you bring him in in into of your current role now?
Yeah. So I mean, like the lessons I just talked about, I use daily in recruiting. I treat everyone with the same amount of respect that comes in. I make sure that I'm really listening, whether it's I'm talking with companies that are looking to help place people or with people that are looking to break into an industry or get a new role. I've learned so much that you need to be able to really listen and pay attention to the details of what people are looking for and able to be able to help them. I would also say too. So like when I came home and back to New York after everything with the Navy and being in the reserves now, I went into recruiting, and it was an industry that I did not work in before. Before I was in this, I was a music journalist, and I used to run a nightclub in New York City, so a little bit different than everything before that. And I was able to kind of take that same mentality that I had of becoming a mechanic for the Navy into recruiting, which was just do it, learn it, and be able to go in kind of fearless with it, which is great.
That's awesome, and that's another key word. Um, is fearless, because a lot of people, they are scared to take that jump. They always say, well, what if this happens, or what if that happens? Well, they don't know until you try.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then, um, what was so throughout your journey for being in in your current role now? So, what is the first thing that you look for a UX UI designer?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on what the roles or what the goals are for the conversation. For example, if I'm looking for a specific type of person to be able to fill into a role, I'm going to be talking about those skill sets that they're looking for. But I think the first thing that I look for, no matter what's going on, is two things, which is being able to have clear communication and being able to have a strong narrative. And what I mean by a strong narrative is them being able to tell their story about who they are. I think there's so many amazingly talented designers that are out there that feel they need to kind of tell everything at once, and then they come out of a conversation, and the person and the hiring manager on the other end or a recruiter will then sometimes be like, that's great, but what do you actually do, and like what's your role on the team? So I think having the ability to really tell your narrative and have clear communication is an automatic green flag for me if you can do that right away.
Okay, and then if you have somebody that basically they are not clear, or they may need a little bit more practice, do you have any tips that basically they can probably to actually improve in one of those areas?
Absolutely. So anytime that I'm talking with someone that's trying to break into the industry or is looking for a new role, and I'm noticing that these areas can be improved, I'm very candid about it, and I've had very open conversations. So certain tips that I have is it's sometimes it's simple storytelling where it's just keep linear. Talk about your story in a chronological order. I would also say that one of the most important things for a designer specifically to talk about is the work that they have done. A lot of times designers are working on teams, and a lot of times when they're showcasing their work, they're talking about everything that the team did, but they don't necessarily sometimes take out the time to discuss what they specifically did on the role. For example, if someone is doing all the information architecture and wireframing, but they had another visual designer there, making those distinctions clear and talking about what their skill set was and what they were doing on that specific product or project goes a long way. And so I'll break it down with people to help them build that narrative in that specific way.
That's great. That's great. So we already talked about lessons learned, and then and then we talked about two things. So if we had somebody completely new into the industry, is there like a certain direction or like people they should follow? What type of industry? Do you have your favorites of designers or leadership roles that basically you follow and you like?
Yeah, so there's definitely a few that I plug into. One of the things that like part of my morning routine is I read Medium all the time on what's going on with current trends and everything in design. I think for someone breaking in or really trying to get into that next level, finding a mentor. There's so many amazing people out there. If you are active on LinkedIn and you start just connecting with people, you'll just notice them. And in every single type of role, whether it's research, whether it's design, whether it's an UI, they're all definitely out there. And like, not to call anyone in particular, because I think what's really important is to just build connections and just reach out and talk to someone. If you talk to a senior level or a director level of product, just ask for their time. I don't think there should be any harm in that. That's the point of LinkedIn, is to connect and to grow and to communicate with everyone. So reaching out and just seeing if someone can take a few minutes just to talk about their experience and seeing how it can work, I think is something that I've suggested to people, and people come back and said that it's worked out really well. I would also say that another great route to go is joining specific groups and meetups. It's something like, for example, when I broke into product and UX recruiting, I didn't know anything really about it. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a really fascinating area, but I wanted to learn more. So how I broke into it is I did the first thing I just did, which was connect with people and just started talking about the industry. The second thing I did was I joined and became a member of certain groups and meetups. And when we were in a world when we can go to brick and mortar places, I would go to the live meetups and do this almost sometimes twice a week. And this is how I built relationships and how I learned a lot about the industry and was able to see where current trends were going. I also think that something that is really important is to be able to be really humble with your experience and like have confidence in your skill set, but just being very open about where you are and showing that. I think having humility it really goes a long way in this specific industry.
That's
By
great.
any chance, do you have you seen maybe just by seeing people's work or hearing them talk, are there like maybe red flags or indicators to let you know kind of what level they're at by any chance?
I would say it depends on what and what it would be looking for. Like, for example, like a red flag that I would see sometimes is if their portfolio is maybe not sticking with the current trends of what portfolios are looking like, and maybe look a little
Mhm.
outdated. That would sometimes be a red flag if they're using like an old product to showcase their work. just because then it puts people in the initial mindset that maybe that they're not up with current trends and what's going on with design. I would say having a bit of like, especially if it's a more if it's a candidate that's more on the junior side, if their titles don't really match up, where they were say they were part of a very small company, but they wrote that they were the CEO of the product instead of just writing a product designer, it can bring up red flags, and that's where like some of the humility comes in that I was just talking about. I think as well too, your work should be showing what you're doing, less than it being very text heavy in terms of like resume. But on your portfolio, it really should be each project should be read out like a case study where it's going through the flow and the narrative of how you worked through the problems that you were trying to solve.
Awesome, thanks.
Of course.
Cool. So we're gonna kind of shift gears a little bit here. As you all know, most of the world, everybody is actually working, remote. And after this pandemic is over, do you think more jobs will turn into remote besides going into the office, or do you think it'll be a balance of like hybrids?
So I think we're already seeing it shift. I can tell you that a lot of the roles that we're working right now that before all this were originally going to be you had to work in the office are now either remote flex or 100% remote. And certain companies that I'm working with are even saying post lockdown that they're going to continue to be very heavy remote flex, being in the office 2-3 days a week, or being 100% remote. So I think it's going to shift in that way. I also think that specifically contract roles are going to become mostly remote. I think it's going to be a cost-saving measure, and it's going to realize that it's a little bit more efficient, that they can work with people that are specifically freelance designers that do this all around the world, or specifically in the United States.
Interesting. Can you go over the terms like flex remote with remote and then in office? Because maybe, I just don't want to assume, number one, and number two, terminology is always changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find.
So we'll start with the easy one, which is in office, meaning that 5 days a week you are working 40 hours a week in the office with no remote flexibility. I would say that is what the standard's been for a long time. In certain heavy regulated areas and industries, that's still the case. But we're starting to see a shift where then it's moving into what I call remote flex, which is where people are working part-time in the office and part-time remote. So whether they're working between 2 and 4 days in the office and then are remote one day, or 3 or 4, is what I would mean by remote flex. And then full remote is that they are fully autonomous, that they are not ever going into an office, or if they are, it's maybe on a monthly or quarterly basis.
Wow. Things has definitely changed, I think. Huh, Adam? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's the wanting to have more or allowing of more flex roles is definitely growing, especially now, I guess, maybe because the pandemic is accelerating it. But I feel like it was always going in that direction, but now maybe it's coming faster.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. So, James, going back, so you've been in the industry for about 5 years, right? Is that correct? I'm sorry, you broke out a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, about 5 years or so.
Okay, awesome. So I've always liked hearing stories. So what is the most interesting story of you being a recruiter? Do you have one that you can share with us?
Yeah, you know what? I wanted to, like, it's funny. I wrote down like a positive and negative story. I definitely have far more negative stories than positive ones, but I wanted to stick to one that I think would be really appropriate for for this, which is a really positive one, which is I was working with this amazing product designer that was just graduating from undergrad from a really good design school. And he was asking me how can I break into my first job. He had the internships, he put in the work, he was graduating top of his class at the time, and we came up with a plan about how we can help get him placed somewhere. And so at that time, this was probably about maybe 3.5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. I was doing a lot of client events where I was doing like happy hours and dinners with clients and bringing out whole departments to once we would successfully place a decent amount of people with their teams. And so I invited him along to one of those to kind of meet one of the teams at one of my clients, which was in the Fortune 100. And they loved him immediately and thought that he was very talented, and that they loved the initiative that he took to come along with me on this to this event. And a week later, one of the hiring managers in that department actually had a new role come up that was for a mid-level designer. And because he met them, we were able to get a first round interview with them. And long story short, we were able to get him an offer, which he was able to he was so ecstatic to accept. And we were able to place this amazingly talented designer who just graduated from college into a 5-year position. And I one of the greatest things, I remember him going in with old worn out college clothing, and 6 months later I went to go take him out to lunch, and then he was wearing a leather jacket, really expensive shoes, weight, great. And he said they joked and they would call him Boy Wonder. And one of the best parts about that story too is that he was actually an international student, and because of this we were able to get him his full citizenship. So wow. He was in that role for about 3 years, and then most recently now he is a team lead at a very successful tech company, and is having a very prosperous career. And so I love that I was able to make the connections for him, but he did all the work.
That is a fabulous story. Good for him. Yeah. I love to hear stories like that, because so far, you hear somebody's getting laid off, or basically, when they do get laid off, they're, they are kind of sad, but then again, they find something else. So it's kind of up and down right now, I think. So it's such a very interesting time right now, to say the least.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'm noticing that it's definitely up and down, but hiring is still happening, which is amazing. And I think as time continues to go on, we're going to see it get back to, I'm not going to say normal, but a new normal. And I think it's going to be the people that put in the work and stay positive and stay humble and continue to do their outreach and connection are the ones that are going to be able to land the really great roles in the future.
I just loved how the way of you just said that people stay humble. B, they do the work, but not only, number 3, have a positive attitude. Don't give up. Don't have, a yucky attitude. Oh, well, this is never going to, well, of course, it's, how the way you think. I think our mind is so powerful, how the way we think.
Totally agree. It really is just about having a positive mental attitude towards this, and it's not like you're going to have it every day, and it's not always going to be great, but if the majority of the time you're sticking through with it, I mean, I'm sure that you see, there's people that are very senior designers out there that were laid off, and they're posting their journeys about the unemployment world and rehiring. It's not like it's any easier for a lot of people at senior levels as well, but the attitude is what I notice, and even if it takes a couple months, they're landing roles.
Well, yeah, that's great. And you guys heard it first. I mean, James is here. He'll be a great person to talk to and connect with as well. So, anyways, I kind of went off track there. Sorry about that. So overall, with our future, UI, UX, maybe accessibility, or like product design. So, what is your opinion about our future in our industry? Because there's accessibility, there's voice, there's AR, VR, there's product design, then you have research, and then you have UI, and then you have a UX designer that's a UI that basically they code HTML, CSS. So what are you seeing kind of happening right now and maybe next year of 2021?
Yeah, so I'm definitely seeing a couple things. In the years that I've been doing this now, I almost joke and call it like this accordion effect, where uh, teams are looking for someone that either can do it all, or they're looking for someone that can be very specific in what their skill set is. Whether it's like they only want someone that does research, they only want someone that does design, or they want someone that can code and do it all. I think that it's finally starting to settle down, and they're realizing that they're looking for people that are going to be part of a team that can do two or three of those areas very well and be able to counterbalance with them. So I think having a couple different skill sets is really important into where we're kind of going within UX. I think as well too, that a lot of what I'm hearing from a lot of very senior people is that UX is breaking like out of just the digital world and into the experience, where I've heard so much about the user journey starting before they even turn on the product that they're trying to use. And I think that it's going to continue to expand outward like that. So I think having a very open mind and being very creative about where it's going to go is really important. I've seen, and I'm sure you have too, in just a few years, how much this has changed, and how much it's grown, and how much more companies are bought into the product as such an integral part of their company. It's no longer looked as a sub tier of creative, where it's now part of strategy and part of growth of the product and the company as overall. So I think we're going to continue to see the trend of the importance of product departments, and specifically within design, research, and UI.
Yeah, that's a lot. Um, I mean, as you mentioned before, some companies, they want one person to do everything, and once they find out that they can't do anything, sometimes the product itself suffers, and they don't know that until it's too late, and then that's when they have to kind of go backwards. Hey, let's start this again. So it's kind of a loop-de-loop sometimes when it comes like that, I think.
No, it absolutely does. And like part of my job is not only just trying to introduce great talent to people, but it's also being able to be consultative and be able to kind of see where I've seen successes happen and what team structures have worked really well for specific types of products that are comparable to their own. And it's one of the pleasures and the extra perks of my job that I love that I get to do.
That's great. So each week we actually have a question, but before we do that, Adam, do you have any more questions for James?
Kind of just to backtrack, I just wanted to see if there was any, if just recruiting in general has, what sort of differences have come about, or like just like obstacles due to the pandemic. Is it like it, I don't know, are there just like different um, procedures you have to go through now since everything is digital?
So, funny enough, a lot of my industry, and specifically like the teams that like I've run and been a part of, have been pretty autonomous before this, where if we weren't like remote flex or partially like or working in and out of an office, all our work is essentially done over video and phone. And the only shifts that have happened is that it's more of that and less of me going in person to meet with people or take them out for coffee, or anything like that, which is unfortunate because it's one of the perks that I love about my job is being able to go travel to new offices. And, you know, like I remember I got a tour in a golf cart of one of my clients' offices that was the second largest office in the world, and go in that side of it. But in terms of how we're doing placements, how we're communicating with people, and all that, that has not changed so much. I know that we've actually been able to maintain a very steady and healthy placements during this time. It's just a shift that's kind of went on in terms of the types of placements that we've seen, especially during the beginning of all this. A lot shifted to contract rather than full time while everyone was trying to figure out what was going to go on. But I think that was just temporary solutions, and I think when we go back to whatever the new normal is going to be, that again, it's not going to be that much of a change from even what we're seeing right now.
Cool. All right. So, like I said, normally we have a question, and this is from Heather T. She has applied to a lot of jobs, but she's not getting any kind of callbacks. What can I do? So this actually resonates a lot as well, because I get a lot of students that basically they go through a boot camp, and a couple months later, you know, they come back to me and they said, well, you know what, I've been applying to a lot of jobs, but, you know, sometimes I get a call back, or basically I go through the first round interview and they always say, well, we want somebody with more experience. So Adam, do you have any insights, or James, do you have any insights on that?
I'll leave it to James to get the bulk of it, but I would say for me is if they're willing to or comfortable just to take smaller contracts just to get more experience out there. You know, a lot of times you're able to get more just smaller contract work. Sometimes they just need something done really quick. And so I found, in my experience, I found those are easier to get and come by. But the more full-time ones take a lot more work. So I don't know, James, if you want to
Yeah,
get your intake.
first of all, I think that's a great point. I think that it's important, especially when breaking into a new industry, that to take whatever work you can. I think in terms of like with the question being not getting responses, I think that it's important to, like as I was saying before, kind of stay humble with it, just because a lot of times like those roles are getting hundreds and hundreds of submissions, and a lot of times, like especially if it's working with an internal recruitment, it just takes a long time to get responses, if at all. So I think it's building connections and building relationships is what I would say is the answer to this. And those relationships, if they lead to small contracts, if they lead to pro bono work, in the meantime, you take it. It's additional work that you can put in your portfolio. I have also seen people in the past do personal projects, and like I remember, it's like for example, like this is one person in particular. They redesigned a few years ago for themselves personally the HBO mobile streaming app, and put it on their website. And then they got a job at a very high level media company because of the work that they showed that they did. So if you have that extra time and that motivation, and you're not landing that extra work, start creating it yourself. And again, getting back to building relationships, reach out to people, get a mentor, join meetups, get yourself out there. I think it's so important to be able to get yourself out there. I tell everyone this that I work with, that getting a job is a job, and you have to put in the hours to do it in order to really get the payoff that you're looking for.
That kind of goes into another question. If there's people out there, or actually folks out there, who are really scared of to throw them out there because like they feel like, you know, they might say the wrong thing, or they might look not professional or something like that. So like, do you have any tips for them just to get the fear over that?
Yeah, I actually have two things, and this is stuff that I do in interview preps all the time. the first thing I would say to kind of get over that fear is when you get to a point of an interview, picture yourself as if you are in that job already and it's day one and you're sitting in that seat. Having that confidence of you already having that job and being able to stay like humble about it, it will really set up one, just you in an easier mindset, a more relaxed mindset, and you'll be asking questions that you would ask if you were working in the job. I think that that's so important because you will then be able to be perceived as if like these are the questions that I would be asking as if I was working, and they can envision you working with them. And I think that's one of the most important things about the interview process is you're not trying to sell yourself. You're trying to show that you're a team member and that you can work with them. And I think that's such an important part of that.
Wow, I couldn't have said it any better myself. So you guys heard it here on the Ramley's Designer podcast. James just said, pretend like you already have the job in the interview and just stretch your stuff as much as possible and have that confidence. I think we're going to end there. I think that is a really good subsection for that. So, Adam, where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, find me on Twitter at Adan Cepeda. That's AdanZepeda. And then find me on Instagram at adanzi.designs with an S at the end. What about you, Terry? Where can we find you?
Yeah, definitely on Twitter. My handle name is Flaxen Inc. FLAXENINK. And then Insta is Flaxen Inc. Doc Designs. And then you can find me on TikTok, which is just Flaxen Inc. But before we go, I want to take extra time because I know James, after people are going to hear this podcast, they're going to be, where can we find James? Where can we find James? So James, A, where can we find you? And B, do you have a shameless plug that may be a project you might be working on, or your company might be hosting something, or basically anything you would love to share with us?
Yeah. So, I mean, the easiest way to reach out to me is definitely through LinkedIn. That's where I do almost all my connections. So you can just find me at James Donnelly. And if you look at Mitchell Martin Inc., I am the team lead and practice manager for our product and UX team. So that would be the easiest way to reach out. I always accept all invitations that come my way and try my best to answer everyone. And right now, I don't have anything currently in the works of what I'm be having coming through, but I definitely am looking to kind of start like a thought leadership group of people that are still struggling to try to find for work and be able to talk about seeing what's working for them and what's not during the interview process. So there'll definitely be more to come on that.
Awesome. I could definitely talk to you more about that. Definitely. I have a couple ideas that basically I want to throw at you for that.
I would love that.
Okay, so Adam, anything else before we say goodbye?
Nope, that's it.
All right, James, thank you so much for spending your time, your evening with us, and explaining your journey and sharing all this valuable knowledge, because I know a lot of people really, really need this right now. So thank you so much.
No, thank you both for your time. This was wonderful. I've been very happy I was able to do this.
All right, so everybody, that's it for now. We have more coming up, more interviews coming up in June and July, so be ready. Aloha.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.